All right, we are live. Everybody, this is Dr. Michael K. from the Center for Functional Health, and I am so honored to have with me today Malcolm McLean. He is the CEO and founder of Ultralite, and we're going to be talking about ketogenic lifestyle and how to optimize our health. So, Malcolm, from down under, I'm really excited that you are on tonight. I'd seen you and I are both part of the Nutrition Network, and I've seen this great illustration that you put up. It was a wonderful food pyramid. And I said to myself, hey, that's the stuff that we do in our office. I got to reach out to him. So that's how I found Malcolm, everybody, part of
Yeah,
the same Nutrition Network. And I loved his food pyramid. It made total sense to me. I know it makes sense to my patients. It helped my patients as well. So, Malcolm, welcome, welcome.
thanks, Michael. It's great to meet you, and thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it. I've always believed that when you do keto, and we have to go back historically, when we started, we did our research with the struggling dietary knowledge that was out there. That we went back to the 1920s and looked at the protein sparing modified fast research that was done back then, and that if you go back then, and I think what happens is people start to go off on tangents, as we get all this information thrown at us. But back then, that diet survived right up until the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And my age, I'm 72. We grew up in the 50s. We didn't have diabetes and we didn't have obesity to the same extent, and nor did we have much heart disease. But somewhere in the 60s, a guy by the name of Ansel Keys decided that, hey, fat's bad. It's going to cause you all sorts of heart problems. And that's when things started to go down the hill. And ever since then. So back in 1999, a business partner of mine, who was a naturopath, we formed our business, and we just stuck to the core values of the initial dietary advice, which was moderate protein, complex carbs. And as we about 2003, I said, hey, this is a keto diet. We didn't even know it was a keto diet back then. So there you are. That's how we started on our track in our journey. And I've had a lot of people try to get us to have keto bars and keto this and all the manufactured food. And I don't know. I just stayed away from it. I just had this belief that, we've got to have a broad spectrum of choices. And if we're going to do this, it's got to be family friendly. It's no good isolating people into, certain aspects of keto, and it might suit them, but it's not going to suit the whole family, is it?
No, it's not. And again, you and I previously discussed, like, this is the stuff that we'll see in the office where, mom's eating a certain way, dad's eating a certain way, and the kids are saying, like, why can't we go back and eating normal again? And the unfortunate thing is the normal for the kids is the processed foods. And that's not normal, right? We shouldn't have that. I mean, I remember even growing up. I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia, and we're known for our gastronomical experiences of cheesesteaks and hoagies and, cheesecake and wonderful peanut chews and soft pretzels. And it was all great food, but, it wasn't until with each passing year that it became like, hey, it became a normal to eat like that. And it wasn't. Going out to eat used to be a treat. A fast food restaurant was a treat. It wasn't all the time. And then it just shifted from like, hey, all the time. And I always share with my patient, with convenience comes consequences. And when ketogenic diet came around, at least clinically, it was never done to lose weight. It was helping children that were having seizures. That's how it really came about. And patients are always surprised because they think that ketogenic diet is something new and it's been around for a long time. In my road, we had patients that come in and say they've done ketogenic dieting and they did horrible. And I'm like, well, what were you eating? And it's how I refer to it is that they were doing what we call dirty keto. And for us, dirty keto means they were eating the ketogenic marketed processed foods. So they're having the ketogenic chips and the ketogenic peanut butter cups, and they were purposely adding a tremendous amount of fat that wasn't needed in their ketogenic protocol. And they were following some influencer, and they weren't following the clinical path. And we saw that happen quite a bit. So I think as a whole, ketogenic type of protocol of lifestyle is good. And I don't think anybody should be in that forever. And I think we should always look at the clinical aspects to determine how much of this and how long of this are we doing. and move in and out of it. I'm not anti-carbs by any means. We need carbs. Carbs are important. I think it's just what we're taking in, how much we take in, and when we take it in that plays a role. And if you have type 2 diabetes, that plays a role. Or if you're dealing with even brain injuries, that plays a role. So that's how we come into keto from that clinical perspective. So on your journey, you weren't always doing this. So what were you doing before this to get here?
Well, I was 120 kilos for a start off. And when my business colleague asked me to join him, he tried to take me to a vegetarian restaurant, and I just about coughed up. I just couldn't handle it. I was interested in what I used to eat. However, what really sorted me out is I went to America to set it up there back in 2003, I think. And the embarrassment was I was the before shot and he was the after shot. And I got hammered pretty hard by the various practitioners we had. So I then reverted to keto and have lived it ever since. And I lost probably 50 kilos. Yeah. And I've kept it off for 20 years. So I'm very happy with that. But besides that, I've had other issues. I had a precancerous bowel part removed. I had a anterior pituitary removed, and I've had various other things done, and I've survived very well. I'm fit. I use a chainsaw regularly. I bike ride, mountain bike, and do all sorts of things, and enjoy life pretty well. And I don't, I still have a little chocolate here and there, but basically I try to stick to moderate protein, complex carbs, and it has served me very well. I'm the father of 7 adult children and 12 grandchildren, another one on the way. So I want to be around a long time. And the one thing I didn't tell you, though, I had chronic fatigue prior to my setting up this business. And I realized I was virtually bedridden for 6 months in the fetal position. So it was pretty bad. I read about 200 Louis L'Amour books during that period. That gave me a bit of pleasure. But when I stopped sugar, it changed. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, but often people say to me, but I don't eat sugar. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, they're like, I don't eat candy at all. I don't eat ice cream at all. And I'm like, well, that's not where you're getting it from. So they often make that mistake thinking that sugar is just chocolate. And my father, he was a type 2 diabetic, had heart disease, history of TIAs, transient ischemic attacks. And he would call me at the office and he would say, my blood sugar is so high, I didn't even have any chocolate today. I'm like, what did you eat for lunch? He said, I went to McDonald's, had a hamburger, and I picked only the small fries. And he could make the understanding that, what he's eating was directly affecting his blood sugar.
Yes.
So I think a lot of times we're marketed in such ways thinking that, oh, it's just the sugar candy that's causing the problems, when it's many, many other things that can contribute to a high glucose level. So I think people need to take a strong look at labels and understand labels, especially if they're buying foods that are in cans and packages and so forth, because it's sneaky, because it comes back and bites you. That's why I'm a big fan of a continuous glucose monitor. I wore one for a month, and the data that I collected was absolutely phenomenal. After you get that information, you know what you can get away with and what you can't. So I think it's important to always take a look at, like, how are you doing as an individual, not compared to everybody else, just as an individual. So when I saw your pyramid, I thought, okay, this is what we share with our patients. So how did you come up with that pyramid? And do you feel that pyramid is different from a regular ketogenic approach, what some people would think be a regular ketogenic approach?
Well, I think we are not opposed to carnivore, but we realize that a lot of people go down the carnivore route. And that's supposing that we were hunter-gatherers, and we, probably, if your evolutionary process descended from apes and that. But I have a strong Christian value, and I'm not trying to say it competes with science, but I still believe in the Garden of Eden, and I believe that the Lord gave us a lot of range of food and I didn't want to discount that. So we tabulated to keep 50 grams of carbs available, but and 4 proteins a day, plus we have a little sachet that has the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids when you take out rice, pasta, cereal, and all the middle aisle stuff. And we've been able to put 550,000 people through the program over 24 years now. Wow. And that they're loyal. They've recognized it's family friendly. You can have broccoli, you can have Brussels sprouts, you can have that sort of thing. You do away with the starchy food, but it's all listed, and later on we might talk about our program specifically, but it's there for the whole family. And I've always believed that you teach mothers correct principles, it's going to flow down the family. And quite often we get couples coming, and it's really good if a husband and wife come because they've got the diabetes or what have you, and they learn together, and then they both are in unison. It's not just mum, doing it. I'm totally opposed to meal replacements. We got molars and long entrails. We weren't supposed to be on a liquid diet. And one thing I've learned, and my research has shown, the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, has a memory in it, and if you live off 2 shakes and a bit of rabbit food at night, you'll waste away. You won't do much for your muscle mass or anything else. But when you revert back to eating, and at the end of the day, people do want to eat nourishing food and feel good, then you've got a real problem because the mitochondria is used to this liquid diet thing. I don't oppose that if people are, talked into bariatric surgery and they won't go away from that, so they'll take a liquid diet just to get the weight in check. But there's so many better alternatives, there are. And I just think the moderate protein complex carb system is the very best. And I just feel that so often the medical fraternity are all drug supporting, they just want to get you on drugs. And I've got a theory how it all happened back in the 1920s. There's no money in getting people well, but boy, there's a lot of money in disease management, isn't it?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a medical industrial complex, right? Either way we look at it.
Yeah.
But for me, to be honest, it's on both sides of the aisle. So I have to be very transparent and say, hey, all these guys want to put us on meds, and like all these guys want to put us on supplements, right? So we have to, again, for me, I look at it really clinically, and sometimes it does require a blend, a recipe. But the idea is like, we want to get you better to get you eventually off the drugs. We want to get you better, so if you're eating right, you don't need that many supplements.
Exactly.
And that's really
out of the food. Yeah,
exactly, right. We should be able to get it from the food, but it does bring up a problem, and maybe you can share how you address this. I don't know what's happening in Australia, and I'm assuming it's the same. I don't know. You have to tell me. But here, the cost of meat, chicken and turkey, poultry, whatever you want, it's all going up in price.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It's becoming harder. So we're telling somebody, hey, we want you to follow this certain protocol. Well, now the food bill just went up, and buying the rice and the pasta is cheaper, but the problem is eventually that's going to cause a problem on this side of things medically, and you're going to end up spending more, right? So I heard a great statement where you can pay the farmer or the pharmacy. I think it was Mark Hyman that said that. And it really hit home, because I'm lucky because where I live, we still have farms that produce, and we still frequent those farms, and we make that a priority. But you can see everything going up. So what do you say to a client that says, hey, this is expensive to do this?
Well, it is, but at the same time, so is medical expenses too. So it's working out for yourself. But in our concept, the protein level is much smaller. You don't need a big fat steak. It's about a palm size. And if you mix it with the vegetables, you don't need to eat as much, because especially if you've got fat in your body, fat can become an energy source.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that ketosis is the most inefficient form of energy there is, but it's vital to the body. And so when your body's put under duress, and it needs to be, it's like when you go to the moon and you come down, you've got to be very careful because you've had no gravity pulling on your bones. You've got to look after it. Well, if we just keep eating food in the center aisles of the supermarket and load up on that, then you're just going to get fat because the body's not under duress. It's just loading out as fat. So when you get into ketosis, the inefficiency of the energy force of ketosis stirs fat as an energy source. So that's how you eliminate fat rather quickly, because it then looks at fat reserves as an energy source. And once you get down to your goal weight, you're in control again. So it's I don't believe we're very blessed in Australia. One of the problems, and I don't want to poo the American diet but I've gone to the food courts and it's not as tasty as Australian food. Now, I'm not trying to condemn it, but I found out the hard way. I rode a Harley from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, and you go through Malibu and you come out into this valley, and the stench of chemicals, I have to say, was almost overpowering. There wasn't a weed in the place, and it looked pristine and great. But you can imagine the land is never in fallow; it's all chemically induced. And so the idea is to have home gardens if you can. Eggs are cheap if you have chickens, and you just had moderate protein. You don't need big chunks of meat to be in ketosis. You've got avocados, you've got other forms of fat that you can have. It's just a matter of planning around it. That's all. And because we offer a broad spectrum of choices in our program, it's not limited, and you can still reach your ketogenic milestones. We use little keto strips that, as long as you're in 1.5, you're doing well. We do have a monitor that people can breathe into, and they can check their ketones at any time. But the crazy thing is, all through our lives up until the 60s, we were basically in ketosis. And the great thing about ketosis is you burn fat when you're sleeping, because your body's, it's an amazing experience, and people just swear by it. It's just that if they've got this hungering for sweet things, it helps them. One of the things that I've learned is, if you say to people, give up sugar, it's a denial thing. But if you put people on a ketosis diet, it's a natural result,
right?
And it's much easier to accommodate. Yeah.
So
and you can go past the chocolate aisle when you've been in ketosis, and you know what it does to you. Yeah.
Right. So when you have them measure like the ketones, I'm always careful, because it's some folks, if they get mired down in that number, right? They're always looking for that number, and I want them to think about more like the food they're eating, how they're feeling, than a number. Whether we're talking about, am I at the ketone level? Am I losing weight? That kind of stuff. We want them. I want to know how the food is affecting them, because we'll see the people that have the effects of type 2 diabetes. We'll see people with like long COVID. We'll see people that, have a concussion, brain fog and all this. So I want to know how their joints are feeling, how their skin's feeling, focus, all that's important to me as well. So when I have them eat a certain way, these are the things that we're looking at. So how do you feel about exogenous ketones? Because there's like these exogenous ketones that you can take. Do you think people should take that when following a ketogenic protocol?
Definitely not. I'm quite firm about that. You notice the companies that do it are usually multi-level companies. You've got mum and pa kettle running around selling these exogenous ketones, and it gives you a false sense of security. At the end of the day, if the liver doesn't produce ketones, you're missing the point, And exogenous ketones, I think they come and go. It's the endogenous ketones that are created naturally. I've had so many, when you're sort of a bit of a figurehead of an organization, you get approached by so many people. Can you sell this? Can you sell that? And my gut tells me I don't need that. We've got a system that works. We just tell people to stay away from the middle aisles of the supermarket, shop around the outside. Frozen food's fine, but you've got fresh food. That's a better choice, but eat it in moderation. We used to, before we became virtual and we used to go and do meetings all around Australia, and we used to produce a plate of food, and people said, "Do I eat all that?" Yes, you can. It really turned them on that they're not missing out. It's just that they get the right proportion, so many proteins and so many carbs a day. Men have 25 proteins, women have 20 proteins, protein is 2 eggs. So you work it out. We got it all calculated, and we give them a structure to follow, and it's very simple.
That's great. I know here, I mean, we've all been told for years now, shop the perimeter. So what a lot of our supermarkets have done is they moved these eye-catching processed foods to the end caps. So just by going to the perimeter, you're still catching them, right? So it's interesting to see what they've done, because they've heard that same thing, right? So, but even those healthy market of foods aren't always healthy. And that's important to consider. And a lot of times people say to me, well, do I get a snack? And when it comes to the snack, I always wonder, like, are we snacking because we're really, really hungry, or snacking because we're thirsty? We're snacking because we're tired. We're snacking because we're anxious and we're in that fight or flight. Why are we snacking? So when you speak to your clients, what do you think is their stumbling block? What do you think is the one problem that comes up time and time again?
Well, it's been our experience. I don't have any little sachets with me, but I might get one of my girls to bring some in. But we give them these little 10-gram sachets they have between meals, and that just sorts it all out. It really does. They're just 10 grams. We've got, I think, 7 flavors, 5 sweet and 2 savory, and it just makes a difference. And they don't hunger. And of course, when you're in ketosis, you aren't as hungry as you used to be. The epistat in the brain, when you're chasing your to be full, or chasing your next sugar hit, of course you're going to look for snacks. But when you're truly in ketosis, you don't miss it. And that's why people can fast for a period of time, because their body's in sync. It's using the natural sources of energy.
Yeah, I mean, we find that when patients follow the protocol, even items that would not be considered ultra sweet, like blueberries, all of a sudden taste ultra sweet because they haven't had it. So it's very interesting, because I really watch the fruit that they take in. Again, everybody thinks that fruit is healthy, and it is better to eat your fruit than drink your fruit, for sure. So you're not going to eat 4 apples, but you'll juice 4 apples very easily. Same thing with orange juice. You're not going to sit back and take 6 oranges, but you're going to blend 6 oranges for orange juice, right? So, I think it's always important that we even limit the fruit, because it is high, very, very high in fructose, and we want to be cognizant of that. So, we'll take blood samples of uric acid. And if that uric acid is elevated, I mean, that's one of the things that's going to come down in addition to the carbohydrates, because that's an inflammatory marker. Some people argue that uric acid can be high if you eat too much meat or too much fish. So that's why I think it's important to take a look at that. When we change into a ketogenic, which is almost like an anti-inflammatory approach, we see a lot of those numbers come down. So, it's very interesting. So that leads us to like that article that you shared as well. The article from, I think, came out from the American Heart Association about that, ketogenic dieting can cause problems with your lipids. It can cause problem with hypertension, and that, they prefer the DASH diet, the dietary approach to stopping hypertension. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think we go the other way.
I think the research that I've done is that the Heart Foundation originally was formed by Rockefeller back in the 1920s. A lot of people don't know that. It was in harmony with the allopathic medical fraternity of keeping people in a state of disease. I don't want to condemn the Heart Foundation, but often they've got a protocol. They're being funded by food companies and what have you. And so it's easier for them to toe the line with some of the dietary advice. And yet we've known for a long time that, when the farmer produces his food, it's what the big multinational food companies grab the farm gate and change it, and that's where the money is made. The ketogenic diet obviously avoids all that. And I'm reading that the American Heart Foundation didn't really want to look at the ketogenic diet because it didn't suit their actual profile, the DASH diet that they'd set up. So they didn't give it credibility. They didn't want to go down that track because it would have affected, the results would have affected their interpretation of what they believe is a healthy diet. That's my reading. I don't want to be quoted too much on that, but I've done quite a bit of research on it. And they never really gave credence to the ketogenic diet. But we know that the ketogenic diet is very healthy, and it does not promote heart disease one bit. It's supportive of giving a clear arteries, clearance in the arteries, and not causing any harm, really. I'm just astounded. It's like the dietitians, they're very much funded by food, and that dictates what they believe. I don't know if it's what they believe, but it's what they're told to promote. There are dietitians that accept now that the evidence is there that the ketogenic diet, and I tend to accept they're more prone to the clean keto that we promote, of a range of choices, and they're coming around. But if you look at the straight university style dietitians, they're not allowed to go down the ketogenic style. It's what the dictates of the funding for the body tell them, and it's not correct as far as we're concerned. But people are very discerning. They're looking at Google now. They're finding out for themselves, and it's interesting that people are making their own choices. They're not being brainwashed into following a certain regime. They're given much better choices about eating, and it certainly helped me clear my mind. And the 500,000 people we've put on the diet agree it's the best diet they've ever had. And we've got people coming back from when we were in America and doing our 6-week challenges. I don't know if you've seen that video, but we had a girl in Mildura in Victoria training an ex client of our American doctors over there, and she won the competition against all the Australians. She loves it, and she wants to do it again. And and I look, it's a refreshing way of looking at nutrition, clean keto. And clean keto is so easy to implement as long as you've got a structure, and that's what we provide. Yeah, it's systematic. It's the client knows what they're eating, the practitioner knows what they're eating, and each week they front up and say, "This is what I ate, and this is, I'm in ketosis or not," and we work it out. A lot of people too lose body size before they lose weight, and it's quite interesting. Have you found that sometimes that their body shrinks and they haven't lost weight as much as they'd hoped, but they're feeling better?
Right. And again, that's where we use our keto approach to see how we can change the clinical compass, right? We want to know what their presentation is and how we can make them feel better. So often for us, it's a stepping stone. And first we'll see it in their face. The face goes first. So and even believe it or not, it's like sometimes after a few weeks into it, and I always say, listen, you got to give yourself 2 weeks because you're changing everything. You're going to feel different things, and some days you're not going to feel that great. We're going to make sure that our electrolytes are on point when we do something like this as well. But sometimes they even report that the snoring, that breathing improves, right? So, there's a lot of more things to go in it than just, hey, we're doing keto to lose weight. So I think it's really important. You talked about dietitian. We had one, I don't even know if she's around anymore, but it was okay. She told my type 2 diabetic patients, like, hey, 2 pieces of white bread a day is fine. And then, you can have the fruit cocktail for dessert. And the fruit cocktail, not a piece of fruit, but that fruit cocktail, like, in that syrup thing. And I said to the patient, I said, well, think about it, 2 pieces of bread a day, that's 14 at the end of the week. That's 28 in 2 weeks. That's 56 in a month. If I told you eat 56 pieces of bread, would you do that? They're like, no. I'm like, then stop.
Yeah.
I mean, they get a little bit crazy, but I think it's changing. I'm hoping it's changing. I mean, we have a lot more data that's coming out, although nutritional data is very, very difficult because, most time people are keeping nutritional logs, right? We can't put people in a hospital and say, okay, this is what we're gonna keep in this hospital, this room, we're gonna just feed you this. We can't do that, right? The regulatory boards will not like that at all. But there's too much give in nutritional research. I think it's important. We got to keep hacking at it. I think we got a lot great more research now. I know often, like, the journals, they don't appreciate case studies because they're one-offs. It's not a randomized controlled trial. But my gosh, from a practitioner perspective, a case study often helps us. So we think that's important. I think if you can keep good notes, good data, and have good share, we know there's going to be varying effects to everybody's individual, because you could eat one way and the next person eats another way and they work out differently. So their response could be totally different with the same food, right? So, male, female, age, hormones, all these things come into play. And that can be very overwhelming for everybody as well. And I'll have patients that come in and say, it's so overwhelming. I watch people on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll speak to my doctor and then a functional medicine doctor, and I don't even know where to begin. That's why, at least with your program, I think it gives them some type of system that they can start and engage in and bring that into their lifestyle, because we're asking them to change their lifestyle. So when you think about your program, when somebody signs up, what do they get? What is the first thing they get?
Well, firstly, we ask them, what sort of diets have you been on? And most of them are calorie chasing. The Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig. I know that's no longer around. Or
Yep.
they're told to, you can have this, but you can't have that. You go into a supermarket and you've got a ready reckoner that compares a Tim Tam bar Tim Tam bar's a biscuit to an apple, and they have no idea. And you can go to the juice bar and have 30 apples and it's full of fructose, and you got no idea of what you're doing. So we have a system, we have meal plans, we have a website that offers so many different recipes. We have shopping lists available. We're just about to launch an app which will be on their phone, and the practitioner can talk to them about their diet. But probably the greatest thing is this book. It's a recipe book, and it's hard covered and it's got beautiful recipes in, but it goes right from the start, and it talks about ketosis, and it gives them all the different foods they can have. And it's interesting, all of a sudden they can alter their own recipes. The one thing I've appreciated so much about having this structure is that people become wiser because they're educated. You put people on an exogenous diet and they can eat anything they like, but you're faking ketosis. They've learned nothing. When I went to America, it was that terrible time, 2003, September, wasn't it? And when we arrived in Los Angeles, we were hauled aside and people had big machine guns, and it was we saw the planes flying into the tower, and it was quite scary. And while I was taken aside and we're watching TV, there was 2 people. One had Xenical, which is a drug that mobilizes fat, but it doesn't distinguish between good and bad fat, and it's often referred to the brown ring treatment. They have a leaky bowel after it, and he was still eating Mars bars and carrying on, and then there was no mention of sugar denial. And then there was a lady who had bariatric surgery, and she was still eating Mars bars, and you just get it all wrong. But when you follow a structured program that's all health based, and you're learning what as a catabolic food and an anabolic food, and you're feeling empowered, it makes a heck of a difference. You know, you can go and get meat on special, you can get the veggies, and we have our little supplements till they reach their goal weight, and they're empowered, and they feel much better. We haven't even talked about the mental aspects, have we, of ketosis? The gut-brain connection.
Yeah, it's really important.
You know, I mean, I didn't realize that ketones, when we first started, are brain food. And we deny that if we're not in ketosis. And, you know, when people go vegetarian or veganism or something, they're not having animal protein. You know, I think it's Brett Bickham says you need animal protein for insulin to cross the cellular membrane. All these things, they're denied people if they don't become educated. And I think what you've hinted there is people become empowered to make the choices themselves. They feel they become their best doctor, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
They know what's happening inside internally. If they're not taught these principles, then they're left to every fad that comes along, you know. But when you've been taught the correct principles right from the beginning, you're empowered and you tell other people. And you would notice this, Michael, you know, you can give all the supplements, you can get an adjustment from the chiropractor, you walk out, but as soon as you lose 10 kilos or 20 pounds, or people say, where the hell have you been? What have you done? Oh, I've never felt better.
Right.
You know, it was very interesting early in our starting of the company, because we were very controversial. It was at the time that they changed the health pyramid, turned it upside down. It was in 1999. In 2000, we were on a current affair and we got hammered. In fact, when they rang me up, they asked, do you want a medical doctor or a dietitian to be the contra? And I dumbly said, oh, well, I'll get a dietitian, you know. And that particular dietitian was very frumpy. She was rather large herself. And she was condemning the diet. You're losing weight too quickly. And, you know, they showed pictures of people outside a public swimming pool given big drapes to put over them because they looked overweight, and cover them up. And they thought, you know, people shouldn't be worried about their weight and what have you. And she actually said, I think it's terrible that people are being ashamed about their weight. I'm not shaming people about their weight. I don't care. But for people who want to change and improve their lifestyle and live longer, I mean, we've only got one life, haven't we? We're not going to come again as reincarnated. You want to be around with your kids. You want to enjoy your grandchildren. Do something about your health. Become, you know, impassioned about it. And that's all we're offering, is a service that teaches people to understand nutrition by doing it, you know, walk the talk. And I think that's the key, because so often, you know, they look at a website and they buy this and they buy that and it doesn't work. But when you've made a commitment financially to follow a program, and you've got a good doctor like Michael Kay or someone who's got an interest in you, you're accountable, and they'll love you for the rest of your life because you've changed their lives. And that's what we're all about.
I like that. And, you know, and even with the woman who we're speaking to who was, you know, overweight or obese, you know, we also have the flip side. And we have those people who are what we call thin on the outside and fat on the inside. So they can have skinny arms, skinny legs, and they have this kind of pendulous pot belly. And when we see that, we kind of know that it's probably this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They got this visceral protuberance of fat in the front of the body. So society may look at them and say, oh, they look better a certain way, but they're just unhealthy, right? So, you know, the way we look is just one factor, right? Because you can have a person who's overweight and their blood work can be wonderful, and a person who's looking thin from a society perspective, and they can have hypertension, high cholesterol, and just be horribly clinically, right? So again, that's why I come from that perspective of like, what is our health goals? What is the family line of genetics? How long do you want to live? What do we want to prevent, right? Because as I always tell people, you're not wealthy enough to be sick. You just don't make that kind of money, right? You just don't make that kind of money. So I think that's really, really important to drive that home. But we're so stuck on the way we look, and that's okay. But we got to get healthy, right? Whether you look X, Y, Z, doesn't matter. How do you feel? We got to get healthy, and that's really, really important. That's why I think, again, ketogenic protocol plays an important role.
Yes, I agree. And one of the things, it's usually the women, and I get annoyed because her husband says, "Oh, you're putting on a bit of weight."
Yeah.
They've given birth to children, for goodness
Right.
sake. They've sacrificed their body to a certain extent. Be kind, be loving.
Right.
The end of the day, men have a worse problem, and they don't realize it. They carry their fat inside their perineal sheath, all around their organs. Some of them, I don't know how they do up their shoelaces, or I could make another comment. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm talking about.
The last time they ever saw it.
Yeah. And women, they have fat deposits in their bust and their bum, and of course it's very attractive to men. But at the end of the day, they take a little longer to lose the weight. But the ketogenic diet does mobilize the weight. And I put an article out, I sent it to you on lipedema.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and I'm targeting all these issues that the ketogenic diet can have a big effect in helping people,
Right.
And I'm working with pharmacy right now because they're very much in disease management. And I believe our government spends a fortune on subsidizing medicine. I know you don't have it so much in the States, but you can get a script for $8 or $10. It's just amazing how the government spends that money. But it's all managing disease. I'm trying to reverse that and have people look at themselves and manage their own life. I think it was Hippocrates that said, "Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food." And if we follow that regime, and that's what the ketogenic diet does, it spells it out, people will be not facing gout at 40. They'll not be on walking frames at 50. They won't be having a whole list of drugs to take. They'll just feel better. And that's why I'm still passionate at 72.
Which is beautiful. So who do you think, should not be on a ketogenic diet, right? Who do you think is like, hey, you should not do this? This is unhealthy for you.
On our system, I've often thought of that. The only one, because it's a low calorie diet, is women breastfeeding if they want to keep feeding their kids. But anyone else, it's no problem. I have a son who's severely autistic, and no matter how hard we try to give him a nutritional diet, he's hooked on certain things, and it's really sad. But people with bipolar, people with autism respond extremely well on a ketogenic diet, as long as do epileptics. But if you want to reduce inflammation of any type in your body, and that can be diabetes, that can be Alzheimer's, it can be all sorts of things, the ketogenic diet is definitely the best. And, if you're still requiring medication, that's fine, but get yourself healthy first and feel the benefits. That's what it's all about. And the fact that we've gone to so much effort to make it easy to follow, and that's why we've had so much success. And everyone gets the same treatment. It's we don't change it for anyone. We might increase the carbs or lower the carbs depending on whoever it is, but that's what we do. Yeah.
So do you look at it from like the perspective of, okay, this individual has type 2 diabetes, so we want them to follow XYZ, versus this person who's working out with weights and they actually require more protein? Do you ever look at it like that perspective?
Very seldom, but that arrives at the checkup. So we do a weekly checkup. So in other words, they go on the protocol, they go follow the system, they report back whether they're in Texas and you're in Philadelphia or whatever. They just fax in their meal plan and their sheet, and it has the results on the bottom. We show them how to do a measurement, their waist and their weight, and then you can comment on that. So it's very easy. It's like we had people. We service people in America from Australia, and all they do is they self-monitor themselves, and that's better because it's good because they start to feel empowered. They know what they're doing, and people on their own need that sort of help. That and to answer to a steward like yourself or whoever is the practitioner, they feel they've got to front up. Some people find it a little overbearing and they might avoid because they've cheated. And you ring them up, say, I'm with you. I'm here for the journey. They've paid their money.
Right.
And they come back on track. Because you're saving lives, really, aren't you? You really are empowering them to be a better, healthy person. And at the end of the day, as I said before, one life, you've got to make the best of it.
So when somebody signs up with the program, so they get a coach and they get somebody to speak to. I know you said the app is coming out soon. So how does it work? Can you take me from like the beginning process to what happens when you sign on?
They'd come to the doc. They've heard about you. You've had some results, and you sit them down. Everyone's an individual, or a lot of them come as couples, and you charge them accordingly. And you just say, look, what have you tried to do before? Why hasn't it worked? And then you get and talk about ketosis, and you talk about prior to the 60s, we were all in that frame of mind. We all were, because we weren't denied fat in our diet. We were focused on that. And when they start to realize they can lose weight 24 hours a day, even when they're sleeping, all of a sudden they take stock of that. And they say, now, you're not on your own. You've got me. I'm the practitioner. You've got a wealth of recipes. You've got shopping lists. You'll soon have an app. And I apologize. My daughter and the team have developed the app, but I understand they'll be able to go on that. They'll have recipes. They'll be able to communicate their results to the practitioner. The practitioner will have access, and it'll be a real team effort. And that's about to be launched. But the website's totally interactive. The website you're seeing now is not going to be there tomorrow or the next day. There's a whole brand new website here to support them. It's all about helping them function as a client with support. So you're just not left on your own.
Excellent. So do you guys also have food that you said, or is it just
no, we've been asked to do that. We're not in the food business. We teach them how to fish.
Excellent.
We don't feed them fish. It's getting them to be proactive. That's not to say there aren't people that offer ketogenic meals or meals you make up, and we just say, when you choose your meal, make sure you get this, and this. But it's too hard. I find the reason we've done well is we've kept away from spoon feeding. We try to encourage them to put themselves under a little pressure because they've got to make the changes themselves. I think if you get it too easy, it's not sustainable. You just don't, I think that's why Jenny Craig failed. It's meals and food being delivered and, light and easy and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, you want to break away from that, and become self-sufficient. And especially today, the prices are going up. You can go to a food market and pick up stuff. You're out walking. You can do things that you probably wouldn't have done before because you're feeling better. You've got more energy. One of the things that I noted is that my head's a lot clearer, my mind.
Sure.
When you're fat and, you're thinking about your next sugar fix or whatever it is and, eating carbs, you just get down, you feel depressed. And I always said that, the gut is a second brain. You wake up with a bloated gut, you feel terrible.
Yep.
You clear all that out of your system, you're feeling a lot better, aren't you?
For sure. And we see it, especially with like our, brain injury concussion folks, get them on a keto protocol and they do much
remarkably well. Yeah.
And we also see with chemo patients too. There's been some research supporting, a ketogenic approach to chemo and then having a lot less post-chemo nausea and clinical complications. So, that plays a role for sure. Yeah,
Well,
I think it's definitely protocol.
cancer survives on sugar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep. So that's what they always say, right? That the sugar feeds the cancer. But it's really interesting because when you get into those oncology wards in the hospital, there's all those sugar snacks hanging around, right? So it's really an odd dichotomy. That's a whole nother conversation. I would love to get an oncologist on to discuss that. But yeah, I mean, I think keto is truly approach for sure. When we started the conversation, there was I think you said somebody had a question regarding mitochondria that you wanted to touch base on that.
Yes, that's right. So getting your well, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and the ketogenic diet has definitely empowered that and improved its properties. Metabolism happens in a much more efficient way when you've got the mitochondria on side. And to do that, you need to feed it the right nutrition. You're not going to send sugar in there or processed foods. It's not going to do you any good. It's virtually dead food. So once you get the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids from the food, the mitochondria performs much better. And as a result, then your enhanced metabolism, because I've said all along that metabolic vibrancy happens when you put your body under stress, to the sense that you're feeding it nutrition that has to work harder to make it work. And I just wanted to mention that I've read an article recently that ketones are heart muscle builders, that you need ketones to build the muscle of the heart. So ketones, if you deny your body ketones, you're letting yourself down. And you cannot provide ketones if you're on a Western diet. It just doesn't happen. And so you do yourself a favor and get into ketosis and have a nourishing, healthy life. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse. And I said before, a liquid diet doesn't solve that. It just goes straight through you. I mean, mastication starts when saliva is drawn in the mouth. It doesn't happen with a liquid diet. You've got to chew and food. And I also point out too that I had a couple of females in my extended family that couldn't fall pregnant when they're on a vegan diet. It was interesting. As soon as they had some animal protein, pregnant straight away.
Yeah, I've heard of that anecdotally before as well. Some other people have mentioned that.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that we get a foothold in America again. The testimony of that girl that I sent you would tell you America needs the diet. It's family friendly. I hope pharmacy looks at themselves as a wellness center rather than a disease management center. And that, it's because it's very easy for pharmacy to just dispense drugs over here because they're so cheap, But what are the after effects? And if people can understand that if they have their healthy body, healthy metabolism, mental clarity through just making better food choices, they're far better off.
I work with a neurologist who shared the following with me. It's easier to write a prescription than it is to treat a patient.
That's exactly right. And absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
Again, and now I have to be, transparent and fair. I mean, without medication, many of us would have been sick and dead too, right? Oh. So, it's not, it's not one side.
It's a combination, knowing both things work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where, I think egos have to be checked at the door, and, philosophies can come together and you can have an open discussion, because it's just really, for me in my office, about the betterment of the patient. And we're on this journey together, and we want to be on this journey for a long time. And to do that, we have to be healthy. Right.
Yeah.
So that's important. So thank you so much tonight. Can you share with everybody how to get in touch with you? And being from the States, we can still use this program and all that. So how can we get in touch with you?
Okay. So just put it in chat, shall I?
You can put it right in the chat, and then also let us know.
Yeah. Well, if you go to our website, because I'm a bit slow at typing, but if you want to put it in, Ultralite is www.ultralite.com.au. And I can, our phone number is 0394361888. Yeah, and if anyone wants to subscribe to your podcast and ask questions, send them to me.
Yep.
I hope one day I can get you as a practitioner, Michael. I think you do very well.
Thank you. Thank you. I really, really appreciate your time tonight. I really loved our conversation. I know we can go on more. I want to be respectful of your time. So everybody, thank you for watching us tonight. You'll see another replay of this on YouTube, and I'll speak to everybody soon. Thank you again, Malcolm.
I forgot to tell you, we have our first practitioner.
Excellent.
Starting, and I'll send her name to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the States?
Yes.
Excellent. Please send her name to me.
Caroline Hoffman.
Okay.
And her daughter, Talia, who's, by the way, doing the 6-week challenge and is thrilled with it.
Excellent. You'll send me her information.
I will. And you'll be very pleased. They've just signed up today, so I'm really happy with that.
Excellent.
So we'll be directing people to her and her daughter. All right.
Love that. All right. Congrats. Okay. Hold on one sec. All right, everybody. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.